Qualys has brought together vulnerability management and patch management, letting security teams discover vulnerabilities and apply patches immediately, all within a single, unified app. Sign up for a free trial of Qualys VMDR, vulnerability management, detection, and response today at securityweekly.com/Qualys. Elastic Security empowers security teams everywhere to prevent, detect, and respond to threats quickly through a unified solution. And it's free and open, putting you in control. Use Elastic Security to eliminate blind spots by analyzing all of your data, no matter its volume, format, or age. Stop threats at scale with automated threat and anomaly detection, and arm every analyst with fast search and integrated case management. Download or try Elastic SIEM for free and experience the benefits of an open security solution backed by world-class security research at securityweekly.com/elastic. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover on one of our shows? Because we'll totally take your guest, cover him with a blanket, and talk to him on our show. No, that's not what we mean. That's not what we mean. You can suggest a guest, and we'll bring them on for an interview on the show, or we'll cover a topic, maybe with a guest, or just cover that topic.
That sounds a little better.
Does that sound?
Instead of that, like, Paul's great. Paul's great.
Or
like,
just
but
the guest.
If you cover him with a blanket, can you fart under it a couple of times?
Maybe. That would be the Dutch.
They pay extra.
Dutch
They
oven.
pay extra.
In any case, you can submit your guest suggestions to securityweekly.com/guests. Complete the form. We'll review the suggestions and even suggest a style of blanket to cover that guest. Learn how to keep your internet self-safe and what's happening on the internet today. That's right, Rapid7 scans the entire internet, produces a report, and talks about trends with none other than fabulous security researcher Mr. Todd Beardsley. We'll talk about some things that may surprise you, and it may mean that things are more secure or less secure, and you just kind of have to tune in to find out. securityweekly.com/webcast. Register for our upcoming one with Rapid7 and learn what's happening and available on the internet today in terms of security vulnerabilities. If you missed one, you can go to securityweekly.com/on-demand. Where do you folks want to start with the stories for this evening?
Can we start on a lighter note?
Yes.
And talk about Lee's story about 3 Idaho state websites are vandalized by hackers?
Yes.
Just because it's about Idaho and I'm not allowed to go there anymore.
And there's 2 people from Idaho on the show. And there was a third one on the
earlier
first
there was
segment,
a third.
right?
Yeah. So what do you have to say about yourself, Lee and Tyler?
Yeah. So basically, I thought it was interesting that, last couple days ago, Sunday evening, 3 Idaho state sites were targeted. They were advocating for the release of Julian Assange. Sorry, I'm having trouble with the word.
Julian Assange.
Assange.
Total brain failure on my part. I need more alcohol. There's state parks and recreation, the STEM Action Center, and personal protective equipment site. It was an interesting, weird mixture of sites they hit.
What was the purpose?
My question is simply, Tyler, what were you doing?
Wasn't me.
But hold on.
You don't hack where you live,
A better question. Don't crap where you eat, don't hack where you live. But where is Julian Assange today? Because wasn't he in the Ecuadorian embassy?
Oh, he got thrown
and he got thrown out because we covered that story, and the things that were being said about him were absolutely heinous. But where did he end up?
I think he's in O'Hare Airport.
So he's in hell.
Well, that's Tom Hanks.
I think that was Tom Hanks, yeah.
Oh, is that what that was? Yeah. Well, it's almost the same thing.
So close.
I'm gonna say Guantanamo or
Yeah, he has not.
one of the
No,
holding facilities.
he hasn't been apprehended, has he?
Yeah, he has.
Yeah,
He
he was
has?
extradited.
Was he?
He got extradited.
Is that what we covered? I don't remember now. We covered it so long ago. I don't remember what happened. Where in the world is Julian Assange?
He's talking to the jumper cables right now.
Discord says he's in police custody.
McAfee intervened and picked him up on his yacht, and they're in Bolivia.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Oh, is that
So he was like, I'd rather be in jail. Well,
Down in Bolivia, hanging out with Butch and Sundance. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, though, you look at federal government, you look at state government, and then you look at local government, and really the level of security awareness that a lot of these places have, not only just awareness, even if they do have awareness, but the level of funding they have to kind of maintain what's expected by the public, what's required by regulation, and then to do that disparately when departments don't work. If a county doesn't work closely with the city, or the city departments don't work closely with each other, or the IT department, or you end up with shadow IT, which is pretty much the running way that most states end up doing this, especially with politics. You end up with a really bad problem.
All right, hold on. So
he's in Belmarsh.
Assange is currently detained in the United Kingdom on an extradition request to the U.S.
Yeah, he's supposed to receive a 50-month prison sentence in the UK, and he's allegedly in very poor health and could die in prison.
Interesting.
That's what happens when you throw fecal matter all over walls.
Yes.
To be honest, that's what really had piqued my interest about the article, was the mention of Julian Assange. But
right, yeah,
but
like why? No, but Jeff, it's a great point. Why target sites in Idaho for the release of Julian Assange?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Was not to disparage my Idahoan co-hosts, but
no, Idahoan.
They're just called hoes now, Jeff.
Okay, not to mention the hose, not to disparage the hose, but who visits an Idaho State website on any given day? Maybe 3 people?
Not even me.
Well, you've only got, 100,000 people in the entire state?
And they put
Tyler doesn't need to. He's got the databases locally anyway.
And they put up a pro-Islamic State message. It's like, and like Belmarsh is going, okay, Idaho's telling us to let him go. Off with you then.
But if you want to promote freeing Julian Assange, why put that on, to Jeff's point, websites based in Idaho?
I'll tell you right now, they weren't targeted. It was a crime of opportunity.
Yeah, okay. Because you
can.
They
be vulnerable. They nailed them.
You can.
They figured, ooh, it's a government site. Somebody's going to look at this.
And the folks at Security Weekly will cover our story and disseminate
all
it
of a sudden,
to the entire world. And now
what actually kills me is just a few months ago they hired a new CISO for the state of Idaho. Although it was a wired posting, the guy seems fairly qualified, and now he's got to deal with this on his watch. It's like,
and he just got like 10,000 hits in the last 5 minutes. So
yeah,
but you're talking about a state, like, again, disparity between state entities, state government, and then the facilities that we're talking about, the state websites we're talking about, those are all completely different things. So
they're running it.
Really, you're talking about, I imagine, 1, these people don't know what states mean coming from other countries. 2, they don't know how rural and out in the middle of nowhere Idaho is, and no one really cares about the state government. And 3,
they probably knew that you lived there, though, Tyler. So I think it was a directed attack at you.
I'm just imagining. I'm imagining guys in like a sweaty internet room somewhere, like going, "We've got them now."
Where is the sweaty internet room?
You've never been in a sweaty internet room?
You've never seen a sweaty internet room?
Like in Asia
There's
or somewhere?
There's a bed with a 600-pound guy sitting on it.
No, it's just like a cinder block place. Like in China, they're all called barbershops, and so there's like a sweaty room, and they've got a bunch of old computers.
Oh, like people that use the internet.
Like a web cafe.
Because like data centers I've been in are really cold.
No, not data centers. These are like places where people go to hack things because there's no backtrace. So, or if they backtrace it, it's like there's some sweaty internet room.
Yeah.
In Nanjing, China, and they go
sweaty internet room is the greatest title for this episode right now.
Sweaty internet room.
That has my vote and endorsement.
That's what we call Paul's WC in there.
So sweaty internet room. That is the sweaty.
I was going to say, Doug, you've been to my office, right? Woo.
And it's on the Discord server.
There's pictures of us.
I win.
It's one more reason to join our Discord channel.
Final point. Since I'm a little bit familiar and perhaps jaded about website defacement, if you've listened to my interview episode, why is that a thing these days? Why is that even newsworthy? I mean, nobody stole anything.
It's to garner
only
attention.
Embarrassing because it's a government site.
I think it's part of hacktivism, Jeff, and I think it's part of, if you're going to hack into something,
It'll get attention because it's a government or municipal site. Maybe it'll make the news, and therefore we can get our message out there. I agree.
It's easier than trying to go viral on Twitter or
Well, hell yeah.
Yeah,
whatever.
because social media is a hot mess.
TikTok.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
If I were, actually, a lot of people are leaving TikTok. What is the new one called? My son knows. Livey?
Cotkit.
No, hold on. It's called.
It's not lively.
Cotkit.
Liker.
Likely.
Well, Liker's another one.
Likely. Hold on. I'm going to.
It also
I'm actually
makes you
going.
wonder
Hold on,
where
Tyler.
some of that news
I
came
have
from
to.
about TikTok. If could there potentially be a company play to get a large user base off of TikTok, and how would you do that using something like disinformation or news, or even just the rumor of this is a Chinese-owned company, which maybe that was not a big deal unless you're trying to make a play for company shares and market share.
This is how old I am. I have to go to my oldest son's Discord server to get the name of the new service that they're using in place of TikTok, which is called Likey. It's Likey.
Okay,
yeah.
Likey.
I thought at first he said Nike, and I'm like, why would Nike
I was dropping
create?
shots all around that. I couldn't quite get it.
Likey.
It had liker, likely.
Is the host they go to me? Me likey?
Me likey.
Me likey? Maybe.
Maybe.
Likey?
Me love you.
Long time.
Thanks to Cactus, I am now the proud owner of SweatyInternetRoom.com.
I was wondering about
you beat me to it.
Usually that's about the time Larry is going to go grab that domain.
You beat me to it. I was actually trying to get to it, and but I still
SweatyInternetRoom.net.
I still own. I'm going to go get Sweaty Shaved Potato though, because I still got that one.
Sweaty.
I was just getting ready to look for that website, too.
I think it's a good time.
When you put up a web page, say something about Julian Assange on it.
Right? Just for good measure.
And then let it get hacked. So
I think we have to talk about BootHole. That's what it's been
Do
named.
that with a straight face.
I think they did that just for us. So
I thought we were going to keep it light for him.
Sweaty BootHole.
SweatyBootHole.com is the website for this vulnerability.
I get referral fees from GoDaddy. So.
Yet, Larry?
Larry's going back to GoDaddy. That's it. It's a race. The race is on. SweatyBootHole.com.
Hands are off the keyboard.
And they're in the shopping cart. They're getting to the checkout, and the winner is.
Who's going to win? We can't go on until we find out.
Someone in the Discord channel is going to own it, or one of the hosts.
Tune in next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.
We'll know in a minute. People that have money to spend.
It's actually.
What do you want to
I
say
wish we had
about
some
it?
fun on this show.
It's bad. Basically, is what it boils down to.
How
Million devices at risk.
There's that. The line that I read, and I read probably 3 different articles about this, and I'll know more once I speak to my friends at Eclipsium, who've been on the show in the past and are doing an interview with us next week for our virtual hacker summer camp. But this vulnerability is a buffer overflow related to how GRUB2 parses its grub.cfg configuration file. It's interesting how even still today, many vulnerabilities come down to parsing and our inability to parse, and just how much it sucks to parse user data, right? An attacker with admin privileges on the targeted system. And here's where it doesn't matter. Like admin, whatever. They can modify this file so their malicious code is executed in the UEFI environment before the OS is loaded.
Right.
Which means anything you load in the OS is completely irrelevant, doesn't matter. My malware is getting reinstalled on the system, and this has been our fear and our prediction for some time, and the fine folks at Eclipsium have uncovered this attack. It turns out it extends to not just Linux and Windows, but hypervisors and embedded systems and all kinds of things use GRUB2.
Oh, no. It could be in the cloud?
Yes, from what I understand.
Yeah, this is serious from a physical attack standpoint. Like, this is one of the things that this is one of the only defenses that we offer from like physical attacks when we're doing like big physicals against large organizations. Like, we're always going to get in, we're always going to find something that we can, get past your bootloader, boot something up, get access, pull hashes. Like, there's always a way to implant, right? unless you're doing good TPM management and secure boot. With this, where you're losing that secure boot option and you're actually able to shim, which is what we typically use, a shim in memory that allows us to bypass authentication. Like with this, you can set a long-term implant either in memory or hardware level. That's when.
But not just implant, like
real serious.
Extrapolate this out to like NotPetya. Was it Maersk? Was the shipping company that was one of the companies hit hardest by NotPetya?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Running around re-imaging machines. Long gone is that, right?
No.
Yes. Now you got to throw your machines out and get new ones, or somehow rewrite your bootloader or UEFI firmware to get rid of it, right? It's at least an extra step, if that step is even a feasible.
At least go back to a clean bootloader. So
right, you have to get back to a clean
bootloader. Not like you can pop the chip off and pop a new one in either anymore.
Well, that's true.
Right. We used to be able to do that with some of the older machines, right?
Desolder, resolder.
You could desolder it, right?
Done it.
I didn't realize that they were getting the GRUB2 behavior under some of the Microsoft and some of those others OSs. I got the Linux connection.
Yeah,
that made
I agree, Lee.
Surprise. And
that's what happens when you open source a bootloader and it actually works. Everyone uses it, right?
And suddenly it's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
Yeah, that's a bad thing. That's. I saw that story. I was like, oh hell! I saw that come out of MSISEC, and I was like, that's not cool.
Yeah, there's a bunch of places that have been picking it up.
It was like
I believe they're presenting at Black Hat about it, but have already done their due diligence in notifying everyone, right?
That literally came out this afternoon. I mean, I got like a notification from MSISEC like this afternoon, like an urgent patch immediately kind of notifications.
I linked to the Eclipsium PDF that outlines everything in their research of what they're disclosing right now. So
you should definitely read that story. I mean, that's a very interesting thing.
Yes, for sure. And tune in next week. We'll have more information on that.
I think that's something to be, examined.
The first time I met all the folks
next week or 2 weeks from now.
It'll be next week.
Is there a show next week?
So sometime during Black Hat.
Now I'm gonna have to pull it up, but anyway, go on to the next story.
Hey, I've got a quick one, and it's again, I haven't been here in a little bit, so it is a little bit on the older side, but it was just one that we were talking about, and it was incredibly fascinating for me, one from the disclosure and the patches, but there was also some really interesting stuff that came out of that I didn't expect. So in July, Oracle did their big patch update, and in that huge Oracle thing, did you guys already talk about this?
No.
No. Keep going.
Looking at the sets of Oracle vulnerabilities, there were 275 remotely exploitable vulnerabilities in Oracle products without authentication.
Dang.
Yeah.
Is that a problem?
But the part
does that span multiple versions, I hope? Or is that all
yes.
current version? Okay.
So multiple versions, multiple products. So there's like Enterprise Manager for Fusion Middleware, MySQL Server, Oracle Coherence. But the biggest one that I found interesting was you go down to the Oracle Financial Services stuff. So there's a list. And there's a specific package called Oracle Financial Services Regulatory Reporting. And there's another one, it was in the show notes here.
The Netherlands Bank?
Yeah. So based on that, the Dutch Central Bank has their own custom version of Oracle Financial Services.
Yeah.
And it was vulnerable.
Well, they do that. They come in and you hire them, and they come in and they build like a custom instance of all that stuff.
Right. But that was the only custom instance that was listed in the vulnerability disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
Of all of the products that were listed, the only one that had any sort of customization for a specific customer, listed for a specific customer, was the bank.
Yeah.
Who has their own custom version.
Sorry. So next week,
Okay.
Wednesday, August 5th, 7 to 7:30, John Lucade, the VP of Research from Eclipsium, will be part of our virtual Hacker Summer Camp and appearing on ESW.
Sweet.
Cool.
Yeah. I knew that was in there somewhere. It took me a minute to find it.
It's okay.
Next story.
Next
That is
story. Where do we want to go?
Ooh,
Oh,
my turn.
Wait, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I only have one story, and in fact, I'm remembering I should have put up two stories, but aside from that, my story that I shared is really just a Visa security alert, and I had a few comments.
Oh, is it the Edward
about
Snowden story he wrote for Wired? Is that your?
No.
Oh no, that's not your story.
No, please no.
Jeff, will this story involve you saying PCI?
Yes, it will.
Oh god, what kind of
Good.
Okay.
Really? That's
I got my whiskey ready.
All righty, we're ready.
I'll just lean on it. Apparently Visa published an announcement because they're seeing some new variants of some point-of-sale scraping malware, and they're seeing it because some merchant somewhere that was hit by it. And it happened to be an EMV merchant, so they got card data, but they didn't get the CVV because EMV uses CVV.
What's an EMV merchant, Jeff?
EMV merchant is one that's using an EMV chip card. So if you're sliding the card in rather than swiping it, that's an EMV card.
Okay.
And what it does,
so we have to revise our old sweeper, Paul. You don't slide your card here anymore. You have to insert your card
here for a donkey show.
Insert your card here. That's right.
For a donkey show.
That's not my card.
And nowadays you can tap it. But what was interesting was I had a coworker ask me, would a vulnerability scan? She knows I used to work at Tenable. Would a vulnerability scanner pick up on these variants of malware that they're talking about? And I'm like, well, no, that's not really what vulnerability scanners do, unless the malware happens to be exploiting some known vulnerability. It would detect the vulnerability. And I was like, well, what was disturbing was, there's at least 3 different requirements in PCI that should detect this type of malware, and obviously at this merchant that, it didn't, which is kind of annoying because it reinforces the idea that people are just paying lip service to their compliance. They say they're doing it, but maybe they're not really doing it. The 3 areas briefly are antivirus, anti-malware tools, logging any addition, deletion, or modification of system-level objects, and then good old file integrity monitoring, where, again, you should be detecting any changes to your systems. All of these malware variants, create files, but this is my question for you guys, and it's why I brought it up in the earlier segment. They're doing the data exfiltration via DNS tunneling. And I'm asking myself, what in PCI, but to put it more generically, what is a security best practice is your best way of either A, preventing, or B, detecting somebody that's doing DNS tunneling as a way to do data exfiltration?
Great question, Jeff. And I think that it's difficult for compliance standards to kind of hone in on this particular type of data, right? I think generically many different standards, maybe PCI included, right, are like, well, you need to look for anomalies in your, as we were talking about in the previous 2 segments on this show, in your network traffic, full packet capture, in your net flow, or in your logs, all of which could collect the data that then you would need to analyze to detect DNS tunneling. To detect DNS tunneling, you need to do the very specific, and it's really not, I say specific, it's not all that complicated, right? The analysis of your DNS traffic to detect DNS tunneling. If you were to look at your DNS traffic in the ways that Siddharth talked about, in the ways that Corey talked about, and probably almost 100 different segments over the 15 years on Security Weekly, we've talked about analyzing data. DNS tunneling should stick out like a sore thumb.
Yes.
Like anyone correct me if you think I'm misspoken on that point, but if you're analyzing DNS traffic, tunneling sticks out like a sore thumb. And that's not even just looking at the record type of a text record, right? That could be different forms of DNS tunneling. Mm-hmm. It basically generates way more like host to host communication traffic in terms of number of packets, data size, the entire basically byte size of the conversation between two hosts is way more than normal DNS traffic. It's one of those anomalies that's very easy to pick out, but very difficult to kind of build into a standard. Like, you should look at all of your protocols and look for misuses, of that protocol. That's a very generic statement, and yes, people should do that, but DNS tunneling is very specific, but I think very easy to pick out if you're looking for it. And people should look for it. John Strand has been very vocal about this. Like, this is not a hard thing to look for. Everyone should look for it, right? Like, we built it into Rita and the open source projects and the commercial projects. Off of active countermeasures.
You have to have somebody capable of looking for it and somebody who will know what they're looking at when they see it.
And then operationalize, like we're talking with Corey, like look at your DNS traffic, go, oh, look, I can detect DNS tunneling. Let me then operationalize that so that basically that lights up and a ticket is automatically generated or something is automatically blocked.
And a mature security organization will see it, but a very early one won't.
So two, maybe one question, one comment. You're speaking to the detection aspect of it. Is there a way to effectively minimize the likelihood that it is a successful avenue of data exfiltration, let's say by doing some sort of egress filtering or just having tight, outbound firewall rules?
Good point. You can't stop the initial...
Not really,
right? Like, you have to wait till it gets to a certain point, right, Tyler, before you actually stop it, right?
Yeah, I mean, the way DNS tunneling is typically done and the way DNS C2 works is you're using their DNS traffic against them, right? Like, you're not even going out to the internet directly. You're going to their DNS server and requesting authoritative records. And inside those AAA records and responses is where you're tunneling your traffic. So those text records are what's doing it. So really, at the end of the day, from that standpoint, I don't see any way other than anomaly detection to see those large volume of traffic going to subdomains, large volume of AA records going to multiple domains, large volumes of DNS traffic from a particular host going over to the DNS servers. So really,
Tyler, when did you drop off into like early 2000s bandwidth levels?
Good Lord, I don't know. Like, as soon as my data breach thing started,
it's like max headroom up there.
I think
it's those DNS state hackers. They're going after them.
DNS hacker.
My other comment, though, is I hear what you're saying about it. It's easy, or it's easy to find if you're looking for it.
Yes.
My concern is that there's so many companies out there. The PCI community being a large set of culprits, if you will. They're only doing, at best, what they have to do from a compliance perspective. How do we, as a community, get the word out to them that, PCI says to do this, or whatever compliance, standards you're forced to follow, says you need to do this. Here's a good practical application of doing that in a way that's actually going to likely prevent you from having an issue.
Yeah, I would venture to guess there are systems that you could set a threshold that would eventually block after a certain amount of basically anomalous traffic, right? Like, it's normal DNS traffic until it reaches a threshold where it then becomes anomalous. So you have exfiltrated like X number of bytes up to a certain point where you're like, hey, no, wait, that's not regular DNS traffic. Mm-hmm. So, Jeff, I think it is an automatable kind of feature into many security products, but also with the caveat, like there's an asterisk there that says basically so much data is going to go out before you can determine that it's anomalous, right?
But I think
But that's not answering my question. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lee.
So I think there's two that you can configure your DNS server to limit the payload size, which doesn't block it, but makes it harder because that arbitrarily large packet doesn't happen. And as I'm seeing in our Discord channel, and I've seen it elsewhere, if you've got a layer 7 next generation type firewall, I hate to use the NG word, but if it can get configured to detect it and then shut it down. And as Paul says, there is some threshold. I mean, I don't think you can cut it out entirely, but you can stop it before it goes too far. That's where limiting the size helps, though. It can only...
Right. And not just the size of individual requests, right, but the size of the communication in general, right?
No, it's...
Because I can tune my DNS tunneling to be under 512 bytes so it stays in UDP,
Sure.
right? But like it at some point it's going to look anomalous, and you could configure it basically at some level to detect it, but it means...
So that would be the egress, is that you limit the payload.
Egress,
if you limit the payload size, you've limited the egress, the capability of
not
it.
just
But
the
it's
individual payload size, but the overall session size.
Yes.
Right.
So once you start exceeding those boundaries now, but again, you got to set that up. You got to be looking for it. You got to be taking action when it happens, or it's all just going to get by you before you even see it.
You know, they didn't build into the RFC the flip over to TCP after a certain size, just like for like shits and giggles. Like there's practical applications to that, so you will break legitimate zone transfers are one thing. So you do have to be careful about
Wait,
blocking.
people still do zone transfers?
It's a great point, Larry. Like so much of our DNS really is kind of like outsourced and stuff, right? Like many of us don't have our own DNS system. If it is, it's internal, right?
Right.
Well, not to belabor this, I'll say it once more and then we can move on. But you're not answering my question. You guys are telling me how to do it. My question is, how do you convince people to do it within the construct of all they want to do is the minimum of what they have to be compliant?
Okay. So when it comes to perimeter protection, particularly a lot of those folks that are in heavily regulated space, something like a next generation firewall is a broader set of tools to help limit access because it's running up at layer 7 because of all the things they can't do. So adding something like this would be more successful than if you're in an environment where, what do you mean layer 7 protections? What do you mean egress protections?
Lee, you're still not answering Jeff's question.
No, I'm just saying what you're trying to do is you've got to get them to learn that there's a comprehensive solution that'll take care of multiple problems. You're not focusing on one. And you're right, you've still got to you got to get the horse to jump in the pond and start doing the backstroke. But I'm saying the success factor is based on showing multiple returns on more sophisticated products than we used to talk about.
And the horse has a horn in the front, which makes it a unicorn.
Only the pink ones.
And it's pink
and sweaty.
well.
And it farts rainbows.
And the pink horse with the horn on the front that farts rainbows is an anomaly in your network that you can detect very much like DNS tunneling, Jeff.
Paul!
Does that answer your question?
Let me try a different question then.
I got him to change questions at least.
Well, I'm giving up. Nobody's answering my question.
He just surrendered. He's like, sweaty pink unicorns farting rainbows. I'm out.
In order of priority, or if I could only do 2 or 3 out of the 4 things that we're talking about doing, 1 being monitoring, 2 being having some sort of antivirus, anti-malware type of product installed, and we could argue about the utility of those or not. Well, logging and monitoring is maybe it's only 3 because logging and monitoring and actually reviewing the logs and monitors is a PCI requirement, but it's what you're looking for, or having something like file integrity monitoring that's trying to detect. So detect the malware, or detect the unusual anomalous traffic. What is in priority? What is the best bang for the buck?
So this falls on a 5, right? On a scale of 1 to 10 in C2 communications that you want to prevent in your network, right? Not even detect, but like just block first and foremost. Maybe detect is a second thing. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being like the most obvious C2 communications, clear text over HTTP that's completely anomalous that you could detect very easily. 10 being the most sophisticated attacker in the world that's using steganography or some other technique that is super hard to detect to exfiltrate data. DNS tunneling to me is about a 5. Anyone else want to weigh in on that number? Roughly a 5.
I like it there. I mean, right in the middle.
Right at a 5.
I mean, if
it's a 5.
Yeah, I like it there.
I would say that most PCI customers, Jeff, should probably be, looking at about a 7 or an 8 at least on that scale of detection, with DNS tunneling being at a 5. I think
it's definitely
higher
getting picked
volume.
Up,
nation state targets and financial companies are going to be 8
They're going to be
above.
the nines, and
Right.
all the. But I agree. I mean, I think you got to be looking at that, and it ought to be in your capture range.
Agreed.
If it's a 5, I agree with the 7. I think
Are you prioritizing that over detecting the malware in the first place, whether it's through file integrity or anti-malware, whatever tool you might have put out there that satisfied your PCI requirement?
That's a different layer, different problem.
That's a different scale, Jeff. Yeah, I agree with Doug on that. Like, that's a different scale. Like, the malware scale from 1 to 10 in sophistication
is another problem.
It's like almost irrelevant if you take the next phase of the attack of C2 communication, putting DNS tunneling as a 5, right? Like, if you, in the previous, for lack of a better term, kill chain, right? The malware that's infecting it on the scale of sophistication could be a 1 or could be a 10.
Yes.
Could be implementing DNS tunneling.
That's a layer 7 problem. And
right.
we're at a lower level. We're a lower layer in OSI than
if it's
the
using
malware,
DNS tunneling, doesn't matter how sophisticated the malware is or how sophisticated your malware and infection detection rate is.
Yeah, I agree. The next step in the kill chain is now okay, so that happened.
Detect the C2.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Tyler, Larry, you guys want to weigh in on this? Because you guys live this day to day, right?
And I'm going to throw this out there because Jeff just asked it in Discord, and I think he's absolutely right. What do I need to buy, and where do I need to put it? And what do I need to do to make it work?
I just saw that.
What blinky box do I need to buy?
That's a great question
That I can ignore.
But that's the question I get as a consumer every day for the last 25 years.
I agree with you 100%.
Don't explain it to me. Don't tell me the 5s and the. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
No, that's the question I would get to. That's the question I would get in the meeting. I start talking about layer 3 and layer 4 and layer 5 and layer 7. And they go, just tell me what I need to buy and where do I need to put it so that we don't have this problem. And so I agree with that.
But that's why we have this problem.
But Larry was going to answer the question.
Let Larry answer the question.
Actually, no, I wasn't throwing that out because quite honestly, I don't know that there is an answer because there is no one blinky box, and buying a blinky box that you ignore doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
And I think that Paul and Doug were hitting on the problem in that detecting the malware coming inbound is a different problem than detecting what the malware did once it was already there doing the exfil. I think those are two separate problems that you need to solve, and they may not be able to be solved best of breed in the same solution.
Yeah.
And one may solve the other. I mean, if the malware can't get in the first place, then it's not a problem. But if it's already there, I mean...
Now, Doug, you know the malware is going to get in. It's just a matter
I
of
do,
time.
and I say that all the time. And I'm 100% with you on that. It's an infinite series.
But that's what I'm trying to get at. That's what I was trying to get you guys to say, is it's more important to detect what the malware is doing
I agree.
than to spend a gazillion dollars on
a blinky
questionable products and blinky boxes that may or may not catch the malware. And guess what? They're always, I mean, the malware that they were talking about in this Visa alert that was published like 2 days ago are variants of malware that's been around for 8 years. So
Jeff, if you want,
why is it a variant? Because they're finding new ways to make it work to defeat whatever protections are out there that are attempting to prevent it.
Jeff, if you want my opinion, I think you sort of nailed it. That, in my opinion, if you're going to spend some money, it's probably better to do the detection than the protection. So if you had to balance, I'd balance more on the side of the detection
Yeah.
than the protection.
I agree.
Maybe 60-40, but it's going to be a tight race no matter what.
But
you have to do both.
The
but
all
either
new
one of them is going to be perfect.
The all new Security Weekly Blinky Box is now available for $29.99. Will solve all your problems.
And that's your DEF CON badge. Just segue into something different.
It's a DEF CON
license from PC-Matic.
I had
the PC-Matic.
I have a cassette player, and you didn't want to open the cellophane.
I know. I'm going to open it. I'm going to. So.
I have a cassette player that plugs into USB.
I know. I do too.
Computer, but
I just hate to open it.
I will say from a DNS standpoint, like just so that the people don't feel like they can't detect DNS, almost all of the modern day firewalls and SIM solutions out there, whether they're free or paid, have the ability to do DNS detection, and that's simply looking at subdomain anomaly size for TXT, looking at random characters within inside of the subdomain request fields. DNS,
like Tyler, Tyler,
like
even Security Onion that implements Kibana, if you give it a packet capture or bro, you can go to a dashboard and you can link your DNS traffic and go, oh, well, that's DNS tunneling. Like, it doesn't, even your junior level, like, it's a very basic
thing. If you
thing.
do it.
It's outliers, like it's outlier analysis, right, Tyler?
Yeah.
Or even looking at your DNS servers, like whether you're using Microsoft or Linux product, like the logs from your DNS servers, whether you're feeding those to a SIM or not. If you're just specifically looking for DNS tunneling, like there's a lot of
you got to get your query logs, but you got to get your query logs into your SIM, which is one thing.
Yep.
I mean, you do have to do that. GrabWell's got a really nice free NetFlow right now that they're offering in the community. So you have really no excuse to not detect C2 via DNS. And we'll be real, if I'm having a hard time getting outbound, or you're doing good, say, categorization filters, or using something like Palo or Bluecoat, where you're looking at the rules and kind of anomaly detection there, DNS may be a good fallback for a lot of malware. It's a good fallback that we use for C2 as, I've chewed through 3 or 4 different techniques using Google, using a Slackbot, using a request out to GitHub. Things to Twitter. When those don't work, or there's blocking or very specific egress filters, then DNS tunnel is the way to go. So I would say that, I wouldn't rate it as like, hey, you need to go detect DNS like today. Your 5 is probably fairly accurate, but I would put that as a priority and a security roadmap for C2 and communication detection, because that goes to the higher level problem and heuristic or behavior level, where are you doing good logging and able to detect anomalies and heuristics? Are you doing good captures and have that visibility into your network? And are you looking at the logs from things like DNS, where common and known C2 is leveraging and abusing?
I do want to talk about Edward Snowden's article on Wired. I will categorize it as very wordy. I don't know if you guys read this, but he says things like, meanwhile, the corporations of the world digested the realization that their darkest shame, their willful complicity in crimes against the public, had not been punished. And basically the whole article reads like that.
Sounds like I wrote it.
It does. It's very wordy. It's very wordy. He says, rather, these collaborators had been actively rewarded with either explicitly retroactive immunity or informal guarantees of perpetual impunity.
Definitely sounds like I wrote it.
You have to read this article.
That's a lawyer.
You got to read this article a couple of times. He says, they became our latest big brother, striving to compile perfect records of our private lives for profit and power. From this emerged the contemporary corruption of our once free internet called surveillance capitalism. I have to say, if I can pick apart the wordiness in it, Edward's saying the thing that I've said on the show for a long time, and that is, a lot of people don't trust the government. More so, I'm of the opinion, in my experience the past 15 years, especially having a podcast that we want to have out on the free and open internet, that my greater concern are the large corporations, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, right, that have the capability to really limit your voice.
Yeah.
To really limit your freedom of speech more so than the government is what I took from that, right? Now, obviously, there's a whole article and there's a whole backstory with Edward Snowden. We've covered it on the show several times and talked about it at length. There's a lot of facts out there. There's a lot of opinions out there. and that's fine. But if we're looking at what Edward is saying today, I gotta say, I agree. If I'm reading this correctly, because again, it's wordy to kind of pick apart. If I'm reading this correctly, Edward's saying something I've said on the show for a long time that I'm very concerned about. The reason why I want to publish our videos on our own hosting platform rather than YouTube, because if I were to sing a popular song and be close enough, that video wouldn't get published because of copyright restrictions.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. So one thing that people don't realize is you see all these people getting mad about the Second Amendment, government filtering, all this stuff. The government really doesn't control these corporations. These are private business entities. Yes, they cooperate to a certain extent, but the government has about as much control as whoever's putting money in lobbying for whatever particular thing is happening that is good for the company. So we really have to realize and take that mindset shift and focus it back to the corporation. The corporations now, they control the media, they control what is published on their platforms, and to an extent, they control what the government is able to control and not control.
But on the flip side of that, Tyler, when the government wants access to an Apple customer's data, Apple has set a precedent that they're like, no way.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, how does the government even control these things anyway? I mean, William Gibson was writing about this back in the 80s, and it was one of his obsessions that corporations will become governments. And I mean, if you watch those hearings yesterday with Bezos and all these guys, they're sitting there in their chairs.
Was that yesterday? There was scheduled to be a hearing.
They had a big hearing. Yeah. They aired it all. If you watch Zuck and all these people sitting there. There's these basically people from the government saying, now you're going to do this, right? And they're going, I see. Sure. Because the government...
They're basically going like, I'm going to do what I want.
But what does the government do to Zuckerberg if they don't like what he's doing? He says, okay, I'll take Facebook and move it to Vancouver and bite me. Good luck with that. You can block it with your great firewall. Sure, buddy. And I'll put up my own private internet because Bezos can just build the Amazon net.
Large companies like that already have a presence in other countries.
They do, and I mean, all they got to do is just say, "Go ahead and tell us this." And the only option you have as a government is to do what China did, which is to build the Great Firewall and say we're going to block all this content that we can't control. And even then, everybody gets around it 100 different ways. So the only thing the government could really do, because this is like the TikTok ban. They kept talking about the TikTok ban, and I'm like, how exactly are you going to ban TikTok? I mean, you don't even have a great firewall. So if the Congress says, now look, guys, you're going to have to do something about this, Zuck's going to sit there and go, yes, we'll keep that in mind. Thank you for your input.
But what's going to happen is, like in my example of, my oldest son, they're going to move to other platforms that maybe aren't based in China. Maybe they are, and it's just covered up. But have the same privacy on restrictions in the various app stores that TikTok did, but they're just not making the headlines.
Exactly.
And so everything is going to happen.
But the government hasn't figured that out yet, because the government still believes they're in charge. I mean, they have to convince everybody that they actually have everything under control and that we can control this. We can protect your children from the horrors of comic books. But the reality is good luck with that.
We can't control anything.
No.
We can't control the content on these platforms. If there's one thing we've proven, we can't control the content on these platforms.
It's a pipe dream.
Like YouTube, I don't know if I added the article about, it was, to me, the reason why, as a developer, using the YouTube API, that I am in a world of hurt and just constant pain and suffering is because this story that came up where someone took like a fake Steve Wozniak something and used his name or his quotes or his picture or a combination thereof to disseminate fake videos and used other people who were famous to do that. Those videos existed on YouTube's platform for X amount of time. Steve Wozniak and others filed a class action lawsuit against YouTube and said that it's YouTube's fault because YouTube wasn't able to pull down those videos fast enough. Therefore, like the rippling effect from that is that in order now to get a developer account on YouTube and get your app verified and be able to post videos that aren't private by default, you have to go through an enormous amount of red tape. And that's not, I mean, maybe it's because YouTube hates their users, but it's also because YouTube doesn't want to get sued by people like Steve Wozniak. Right,
yeah, but then the videos just go elsewhere, and they're still there.
Right.
So
and
it's just, I mean, it's just an unending. You know, you're trying to chase this modern demon with these ancient approaches of the police will save you, and instead you're chasing this thing across these sovereignties, and and nobody knows who's in charge, and it's just total chaos.
What comes down to like the whole.
You have to realize.
Go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, you have to realize that the government. I mean, that is in order for other systems that tie into this. Take the financial market, right? The financial market worldwide, globally, works on stability and the understanding and reassurance of the public and the government's ability to back whatever we're spending it on. And so if we don't have that within inside of platforms and control, the financial market starts to fall, and therefore we have to start making sure that the market looks good, and we have news to do that, and we have to control that to a certain extent. So these platforms all play into the global scheme. No one really has control of everything, and that's kind of the piece that people don't realize. Anybody that's worked in the government knows that it is not organized enough, and divisions do not talk and coordinate enough to do kind of the spooky things that everybody thinks they do. Yeah, we have some coordinated efforts and we do some cool things, but at the level that people think we do it at, not a chance. Like, there's too many.
And it's not fast enough. I mean, it's going to take them so long to respond that by the time they actually get around to developing white papers, hearings, and all this stuff, 2 years has passed, and everybody's going, they pass a law against TikTok, and everybody's going, what's TikTok? You know, I mean, and they're going, we now have a law. We're protecting your children.
And now it's Likey.
Yeah, and it's like, by the time the law hits the books, Likey is the new thing, and they're like, we have banned TikTok. We have protected you. And in reality, it's like, I don't care. Nobody uses that anymore.
So then everybody's moved to the cloud, right? And now we're talking about all of our reliance and everything that we're doing with the big shift of all the major corporations, banking, global industry at a whole is moving to the cloud. And this cloud, the cloud, is controlled by 3 or 4 major players. And those major players have control. They are private businesses. They have the ability to do what they want. And so really we are kind of at a precedence
but fortunately,
where
Tyler,
we have to look at this.
Amazon wants money, and therefore I can host whatever video I want on S3 as long as I'm paying my bandwidth bill, dude. Like, it's all good. In fact, the latest version of our software that we released, guess where we're posting our videos to? By default at first, it's not YouTube because of all the issues. It's S3, right? And they're running specials. They're like, hey, CloudFront, you can get free for 12 months because we want you to pay the bill to Amazon, right? We want you to host all of your infrastructure on Amazon and pay the bill. Therefore, we'll offer these specials, and we're doing it, right? I'll host our videos in S3, totally fine. My video's not being taken down because of copyright infringement. Whereas on YouTube, again, if I cough and it sounds like a copyrighted song, my video's taken down. Yep. Not the case on S3, as long as I pay my bill. And that gets into net neutrality, right? Like, whoever's got the biggest, checkbook basically controls which content is being disseminated on the internet. And that's something I have a problem with, for sure.
I mean, did they say that yesterday Bezos's net worth exceeded like the GDP of New Zealand or something like that? And I'm like, well, Donald Trump famously said, I could go out on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and nobody's going to be able to stop me. Well, Bezos could make Donald Trump go out on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Amazon's got a lot of...
Amazon, and I say this having been there last October, which seems like a million years ago when we actually traveled. Right. But I was at their headquarters because I was keynoting their kickoff inaugural crypto conference. It occurred to me, Amazon is a nation state. I mean, they had a crypto conference and they had like 150 cryptographers in the room. And I'm like, I haven't been around this many crypties since my NSA days. Holy crap, they're a nation state. Yeah, and I don't know where they would rank, but I would imagine they're probably in the top 20 or 30.
Oh, yeah. I guess, but today from Amazon, I just want them to ship my shit faster. Like, that's really all I want right now. Like, hey, AWS is awesome and all, but like,
And that's William Gibson's world. It's like you sign on. I'm an Amazonian,
right?
And you become. They protect you and they take care of you and they give you insurance and you're part of that whole operation. Hey, Jeff Bezos, call me.
That's a really bad movie called The Circle, and a couple.
Well, The Circle was like that, but I mean, but I mean, that was what Gibson was getting at with this. There's all these corporations, and they really just run everything.
Yep.
I mean, look at Raytheon. Raytheon's one of the largest economies in the world. I mean, people worried about like Mozambique. Raytheon's the people. I mean, they're a country. They're bigger than most countries, and if you think they can't call somebody in Washington and go, "You're going to do this," and they're all going, "We're going to do this." Because if you don't, we'll just take our marbles and go home, and you'll be done.
You know what's interesting, though? All of us have agreed so far with what Edward Snowden has said in his article.
Yes.
Or he's agreeing with us.
Or
in a more concise way.
In a very well-written way. I will say it's wordy, but it's very well-written, right?
It sounds
if you read the paragraph I put, the whole article.
You do have editors at Wired.
Agreed, Jeff. Agreed, Jeff. When you write an article for Wired, Jeff, having been part of the same organization that had editors, Jeff, that you and I both worked at, right? They work wonders.
When you go read the article, if you haven't read it yet, go read it and imagine that it's being read by Abraham Lincoln in a stovepipe hat at Gettysburg, and it has a much better impact on you. It's like, that was what I was thinking the whole time I was reading that. Oh, wow, it's like if Lincoln was reading this, it would be like, wow, this is one for the ages, guys.
I have to say it's a great article. And if you know what, I agree or disagree with what Edward did or not, but
we've moved on from that.
Move on from that and read this article.
Read this article. It's a good article.
It's a good article
it really
to read
is.
And form an opinion on. Whether you agree or disagree.
And it says it in a very eloquent way.
It does. Agree.
Yes.
It's not too often that we cover an article that's written in this way, that's thought-provoking and very just eloquent.
427 versions ago.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Having said that, reading articles on the internet, hackers broke into real news sites and planted fake articles. This was a ghostwriter campaign. They deployed a bolder tactic. They hacked the content management systems of news sites and basically posted their own stories.
Why not?
I mean, why wouldn't you do this? Now, the bone I have to pick, and this ties into Tyler and I believe some of Lee's articles as well, is in this article, we're talking about ghostwriters, which is basically propaganda that's tied to other types of things, events happening in Poland and such, right? But at the end of the article, they're like, well, I really feel, Jeff, to your point, that we have editors. And the editors were like, we haven't talked about Russian GRU. So, we don't have any evidence that the GRU had anything to do with this, but we should mention them in this article.
Might as well.
And so by no evidence whatsoever, the article actually states, while FireEye has made no such claims that the ghostwriter news site compromises were the work of GRU, they argue that the incidents in Poland and the Baltic should nonetheless serve as a warning that it could be GRU.
That's a William Randolph Hearst tactic where you just ask a question and then you cannot be called out. So you go, could this be the GRU? It could be, but could it? And then you're covered.
Propaganda and social engineering come at a crossroads.
Absolutely.
Totally at a crossroads. And Tyler and Lee, I think you had
28,
right? You had articles about GRU that were actually about the GRU, not just articles about ghostwriter that were speculating.
Could it be the GRU?
Yeah.
Is Doug White a secret sex god?
Saying there's a chance.
The power of suggestion.
I'm the government, so we're going to have a meeting to schedule the meeting to talk about that, Doug.
Right?
Yeah. We'll schedule that for early next year after the election.
That's right. And then the following quarter, we'll have a focus group.
That's right. And we'll hold hearings. We'll hold hearings by next fall. The 2021 fall will have hearings. TikTok will be banned, by God.
And Lee is illustrating a great truth of government, not to paint everybody in the same light, but it's so bureaucratic and it's so slow. I wonder why people are always worried about the big brother of the government, to go back to the last article, and not all these very nimble, large companies that are really just after your information so they can make more money.
Jeff, I wholeheartedly agree with your statement.
Yeah.
Yep. Tyler, you had 18 articles. I believe some of them were about the GRU.
And somebody's got to teach him how to put the articles in the wiki.
He
got better. He got better.
He's learning.
PPWorks wasn't working.
At least the links are there.
They have numbers this week.
You can blame it on my software. You'd be totally fine doing that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we would be very disappointed, and we'd be naive if we didn't think that the other governments are not actively working to try and infiltrate, put disinformation, misinformation, control things happening, getting people riled up. We have an election year coming up. We've got a pandemic, and we have a controversial president/country happening right now with a lot of turmoil. Like, this is classic. This is what nation states do. This is the reason that they hack. This is the reason that they have intelligence agencies. This is kind of where we're at in the state of affairs. So really, none of the things that come out surprise me. And honestly, I'm surprised that we're not seeing more of it, which also makes me worry even more that there's a lot more going on that's being covered up by all the smoke and mirrors in the news.
Tyler, it makes me think, just listen to what you're saying, right? That like nothing happens by accident in terms of what we're talking about, right?
I mean,
Can't we just
honestly,
go back to the
if
good
you
old
look at
days
that
where
and you
North
think
Korea
about
was
it,
going to
yeah,
launch a
it's-
missile at us?
Well, hold on, Larry. What were you saying?
Sorry, real quick, Tyler. Can't we just go back to the good old days when, all we had to worry about was North Korea launching a nuclear missile at us?
Yeah, wouldn't that be
seems like
something?
It was such simpler times.
Or Russia launching a nuclear missile at us.
Well, I mean, in recent times, like the big, we make the joke, the big news foil that we say, oh, it must have been a slow news day, was when shark attacks show up on the news.
Yeah.
And I can't believe it's a slow news day right about now because we had shark attacks on the news this morning.
We're
on the national
numb.
news.
There was some in Rhode Island, Larry.
Yeah.
What's that?
Recently, there was some in Rhode Island. Shark attacks, literally.
Yeah, Maine. Somebody got killed in Maine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the fact that we're talking about shark attacks is because it's a slow news day. Can't we just go
It's
back
because
to
we're all
weapons?
numb to the crazy stuff.
But what gets me, and I was thinking about this the other day, right? When we think about COVID-19, if you watch the news in the past few months, you never saw the news cycle cover, hey, look, here are these hundreds or thousands of people that tested positive for COVID-19 that were totally fine. You only saw the people who were diagnosed with COVID-19 that were in critical care, that had survived, and or, God rest their souls, had passed away from COVID-19. That's all you saw in the news, right? You never saw the positive aspects of it, right? And I think that's really where the news is very much slanted towards, is
sensationalism.
Sensationalism.
Always has been.
Yep.
Though.
That's where you make money, right? And you start to think about why is that? What is the bigger picture? You look at even the hacker groups are targeting the Vatican, for example. That's a big one of my stories in there was on the Vatican and the Chinese government. Well, what is the big picture that makes the Vatican or a religious group, a prime target? You think about where we're at in the world, and they control a large sect of people that they're trying to keep out of China. They control a large sect of the voting population worldwide based on their recommendation and what they say. There's a lot to be said. They're an entity just like a corporation is. They're almost a government in and of themselves. So we have to think a lot bigger than I think we've been traditionally having to do. And the people that are thinking at this level, even us just talking, we're talking about, the 5 to 10% maybe of Americans. The other 80% is looking at the news. They don't have other sources. They're not typically thinking for themselves. They're, at their work talking with people that are in their, field. They don't have the visibility and even some of the technical aspects or insight that a lot of us have. And so they have no other option. So really, the 10%
but technical aspects, Tyler, what I come down to is, oh my God, if it's an image posted on social media that is stating some kind of fact, instantly red flag should go up. You should validate that, right? Because I think 99% of the time, if it's an image that is portraying a fact, it's bogus. Completely.
But that's
tell that to your mother-in-law,
right? Jeff,
did I say that out loud?
Been the media, right? We're dealing with the generation where the media was the true source, was the true fact, and that was the only way to disseminate that information. And you're bringing along a lot of the people that are still linked to that generation mindset and technical capability and aptitude. And so there's no real way for them to distinguish right from wrong.
And you have to keep it simple. If it gets too complicated, it's not going to make the news, because the minute you start talking about DNS tunneling, everybody's like, I don't know what that is. I think Tyler's 100% right. It's back to like Walter Cronkite and the idea that Walter Cronkite says, is the war in Vietnam lost? And everybody's hanging on the edge of their seat, because if Walter Cronkite says the war in Vietnam is lost, everybody goes, the war in Vietnam is lost. But today, it's not that simple. There's 8,000 sources. You don't know which one to trust. This one's saying this one's saying that. This person's saying that alien DNA is being injected into vaccines, and some people are going, absolutely, I believe that.
And 5G is somehow...
5G is going to turn you into Bill Gates, and you're going to get chips going to grow inside your nostrils.
Is that the latest...
No, they're saying it. I mean, they say, all this ridiculous stuff, and people just put it out there, and then it becomes a thing. And if it's something people can understand, they grab onto it.
And Doug, the Flat Earther Society has memberships all over the globe.
I know. I'm going to join right now.
I'll say this.
I'm giving up. I'm just joining the Flat Earth Society. I'm saying the hell with it. They make some good arguments.
Has the Flat Earth Society now been sitting on the beach? And I get that, like, not everyone in the U.S. or across the globe has access to a beach. All right, but, like, put that in perspective. You sit on the beach, and you're watching a boat, and it's going away from you, and all of a sudden you can't see it anymore.
Because the lenses in your eyes are curved.
It just gets smaller and small. Like, that's not an optical illusion. That's because the Earth is friggin' round.
No, it's because your lenses in your eyes are curved, and that makes things, it's refraction.
Oh, God.
And 5G waves. And alien DNA.
And this is 80%.
Alien DNA is not a thing. Alien, come on now. Let's.
All right, I'm getting out the swabs.
I wanted to say to you, Paul, because you were just, you were saying, the news does all this, and we've gone off on that for the last 5 minutes. But the news is simply 5, 10 months, years.
Lost track of time, Jeff.
The news is simply giving the public what they want. If there wasn't a response, so it's not the news's fault necessarily.
Got to sell them papers.
It's what people are willing to receive in and accept.
Sadly,
I am more aghast as an old timer curmudgeon-y type that so many people they count as their news sources, Facebook. Social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever, social media, and not the news print. It used to come in paper twice a day.
Twice a day if you were smart. You get the morning and the evening. That's right.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
My dad read the morning and the evening.
I remember that.
At breakfast, he read the morning paper, and at dinner, he read the evening paper. And he did that every single day, and we got 2 papers so he could read the morning and the evening edition. And that way
I just did the Sunday paper because I like
and the evening paper would have the actual results of Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't stay up late enough to watch the end of the game because I was a kid and I had to go to bed, so I couldn't hear Dandy Don sing his song. And the morning paper was always going to press before the game was over. So the evening paper had all the sports results.
But it had yesterday's stock market results, so you kind of knew that the Dow went up 20 points and everything was great.
Yep.
Unlike today where it's like up 2,000, down 2,000, down 5,000, up 4,000. By the end of the day, you're just like, buy, sell, trade, I don't know, jump out the window. Alien DNA.
it's a cookbook.
Stop. My other comment.
Tyler just left.
I'm pretty sure the Soviets invented all this back in probably the 40s, if not the 30s. We used to call this propaganda, and it's still propaganda. It's just taken on a new form.
Maskarovka.
Now, Jeff, I don't know if they invented it, but if they did, cool. But I certainly would say that they perfected it.
Yes.
Is it it's in my news in the 40s. Yeah, it's one of my stories.
Is it the Russian word maskarovka?
What story?
I think it's Molotov cocktail.
Maskarovka means like
because I can't read headlines. All I see is URLs.
My bad.
I did want to talk about the Garmin ransomware hack.
Yeah, we should probably.
Vice.
I think we should talk about that spill in your shirt too.
Is there?
Only a little bit. It's alien DNA dribbling out.
I really am just literally dribbling.
Yeah, he's dribbling now. It's
a hot mess.
I do want to talk about my story number 16, regardless of the state of my shirt. The Garmin ransomware hack is horrifying, according to Vice. I saw multiple articles that were calling out So this is where I tend to transitioning, right? I try and validate our sources, right, of what's happening, and I do that by basically reading and or talking to multiple sources. And when I do that, I mention it on the show, and I get everyone else's opinion who's on the show, that we all understand the facts in the same way. The Garmin ransomware hack is horrifying. I believe is something we can all get behind, that they are very lackluster when it came to security of certain product lines. The article that I read, which made me really shake my head, like the opt-out features, so you can opt out to gain more privacy. However, that means your features go bye-bye.
Yep.
So while most Garmin smartwatches, we were talking about that during the break, Larry, because you've got a new fetish with watches, which totally understandable, do not connect to the internet natively and store workout information on devices themselves. The Garmin Connect app, however, does not allow users to transfer their workout information to the app without storing it on Garmin servers. Garmin allows users to opt out of this program of sharing workout information. However, opting out makes the app essentially useless. So this is this is very concerning to me from a privacy perspective, that I do get as a consumer, the ability to opt out. However, if I opt out, I lose a whole ton of functionality. Mm-hmm. To me, that's not an opt-out.
That's pretty much every wearable, though, right?
It is. You're right.
If you look at all the wearables, that's, the iPhone, if it doesn't have cellular connection, all of these wearables do the same thing. Mm-hmm. The real key in that you're saying, like, the privacy was a big deal, right? Like, everybody's wearables are going to be at risk, but the product line in which they made the jump from the Garmin wearables to military Garmin GPS, which entirely different infrastructure, entirely different regulation, entirely different product lines, and even company sides. So, yeah, the lackluster on the wearable sides, that's concerning, but that's pretty much every product that you look at and touch, especially if you're talking subsidized wearable fitness products that are selling for, $50 and connect to your phone and just monitor your heart. Like, all of those are going to be bad.
Because they're monetizing your data, basically.
Yes, that's how they subsidize it.
Mm-hmm.
Big time.
Ugh, like every other company we've been talking about tonight.
Leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
But that's the modern age. You got to get used to it. I mean, everything is like that. I mean, there's nothing that's not doing that at this point. I mean, there's no company I know of that's not monetizing your data. And yeah, you can opt out, but then it's just kind of like, well, then we don't want you, so move on. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're just one step from just saying, look, either do it or just don't use something else, and there's no other choice. So you don't have to be on Facebook, but if you want to be on Facebook, then they're going to monetize you.
Right.
So, you don't have to be on TikTok.
You don't have to work out, but if you want to. I've opted out of that.
If you really want to pull on your tinfoil hat, about the same time that, right before the ransomware happened, or right about the same time, Garmin just got certified a function that's an auto land emergency landing system for private planes. Right there. Now, basically, it'll take over the plane if it detects it's going to crash and land it safely, preferably possibly at an airport for you. Huge piece of IP. I mean, is
airport optional.
Is this a whole bunch of detraction from somebody taking some IP from Garmin, rather?
And I mean, that's ransomware, right?
Or trying to make a play.
Exactly.
Like mailing random U.S. citizens like seeds to grow. Is that?
Well, I wasn't going that far down the hole, but sure, why not?
You don't.
That's the best. That's the slowest.
The seeds is you don't even need to grow them. What do? You throw them in the trash, and where do they end up?
The landfill.
The landfill. And they grow on their own.
That's the slowest attack that ever existed in the history of the world. It's like, we're going to mail these weird seeds to you, and in 15 to 20 years, these invasive species are going to skirt you
because, like, your options are, okay, I throw them in the trash, or I flush them in the toilet, like...
Or smoke them.
Or like, somehow, maybe some of those seeds survive and grow. Right?
Yeah. I mean, smoke them. No, I know. You're supposed to preserve them
ready.
and turn them over to like agriculture
I'm
department.
ready.
But a lot of people did turn them over to the local.
No, you're supposed to like
yes.
seal them up and call
And
the
they-
agriculture
right.
department and turn them. That's what you
So
should
please do that, and please
Don't smoke
advise,
them, yeah,
but
it's-
advise your family and friends to do that
Yeah,
if
don't
you do
smoke them.
get because that's a really
Who
me,
knows
like-
what the hell they are?
like. Look, if we were hackers in a different country and we were like, how do we mess up another country? Like one of the things we would do would be like, let's just mail seeds to like random people, and like even if 1% of those people throw them in the trash, there's a chance they could grow and like take on. And you know what I mean?
It's just
Like
like the
we would do
weirdest-
that as hackers. Like we would, that would
I know,
be a
but it's
valuable
like the weirdest
thing, right?
thing ever. Like, okay, I'm going to plant these, and then they grow into some kind of mutant Chinese vegetable.
But even if one person plants them, right, or maybe a subsection of that actually throws them in the trash,
No,
or flushes them down the toilet, right? Like
nothing is more Chinese than the long game. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
it's like
That's
So
that's
true.
the Ugandan spearfish game, right? Like
Absolutely.
the prince is going to give you some money if you give him some money.
it's all. I mean, it's a very interesting thing. But yeah, that's exactly what hackers would do. But you got to be a long game hacker now. You got like in 10 to 15 years, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Doug, you think about that from us here in New England, and sort of greater. You think about Japanese knotweed.
Yeah,
That's
I
that
mean,
bamboo-looking stuff that we've
Yeah.
all got grown in our freaking yards that you just can't get rid of.
yeah.
There's something that
I mean, I know I'm making light of it, but it's actually like a really bad thing. I mean, it's,
what was the stuff that grew in the south up on
Kudzu.
trees?
Kudzu.
Kudzu.
It'll take over. If you've
It'll
never
take
been to
over.
the South and
It's
you've
got-
never
still
seen
growing.
like a massive, like
I have.
like I saw a scrapyard once that
North
was
Carolina.
completely
Yeah.
covered in kudzu, and in fact, there was a field behind my parents' house that was completely covered in kudzu. When I was a kid, it was just like a field.
But that came from somewhere in Asia, right?
Yeah, somebody brought it over and planted it, and then, you know, it was like a ground cover, and it was like really grew really
And
fast.
but it grows really well in the south here in the U.S.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Same thing with the knotweed here in
yeah,
the U.S.
absolutely.
The good thing about the Asian knotweed here in the U.S., when you get them when the stalks first come up, and you cut them, you can actually eat them, and
Or
they
smoke them.
supposedly taste like rain.
Uh-huh.
Interesting.
Whatever rain tastes like.
They taste like rain. Okay.
Mm.
Every day I wake up and I'm like, man, I like a big bowl of rain. It's just like, God, it's like when I was a kid, we had big bowls of rain, and I remember Mom going out.
That's all we could afford was big bowls of rain.
Yeah.
So Mom would used to.
Mom
cook up
going
those-
out to the rain barrel and saying, "Okay, we eat today."
What did they put in that
Rain
cigar you're
soup.
smoking right now, Doc?
Chinese seeds. I've been smoking them things all day.
Okay, I was feeling like we should wind down, but a headline caught my eye.
Oh, yeah, let's do it, Jeff. We're not winding down.
bring it.
We're winding up.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
some of us have wives. So the headline is vulnerability allowed brute forcing passwords of private Zoom meetings. And my initial thought is, what prevents you from brute forcing to begin with? So I'm intrigued by the headline. Did anybody actually read it?
Which story is it?
Sorry, Paul. That is
Paul's
your
number 6.
story
Paul's
number
six.
6.
I have those.
It
on my
sounds
screen
good,
here.
right? I didn't actually read it, though.
I
Yeah,
have
well,
not read that one yet.
Unless it's
there
giving
was a
you access
tool
to
out
the
there that
hashes
went
or
away.
something like that.
Sorry, there was a tool out there that went away that could brute force the passwords. There was also one that could brute force the meeting IDs and that type of stuff, and it quickly went away. And I had a copy of it, and I just kind of got rid of it recently, just because.
I want to say I know.
You can
I
only
know.
digital hoard so much.
I want to say I know some of the people that wrote some of this code that disclosed this, and
They're HTTP requests that are cached, I think, and so Zoom caches all these credentials when the Zoom session starts. And I guess if you can send HTTP requests in during the meeting, you can actually extract some of these passwords.
is this like a fixable bug? Is this just like
Yeah,
a
well,
random
it should
number
be,
generator
yeah.
problem?
Yeah, I mean it's a fixable problem on Zoom's end.
Yeah.
Detect
I get it.
users that are brute forcing passwords, guessing too many passwords for any individual session, and then block their IP.
There you go.
Right. They put rate limits in,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then
Well,
There were some
because you
CSRF
just need
issues, too.
lead to your point, right? You just need to slow them down enough to make the attack. Jeff, really back to your crypto problem, right? That you worked at when you worked for NSA. Slowing people down enough to make it infeasible to
make it
execute
longer
the attack,
than the expected lifespan of the universe, and you're good to go.
Okay. But all right. So brute forcing is something that's always available. Of course, you have
absolutely
brute force against.
Yep.
I'm reading through the article, and I think what they're saying, and what you guys are alluding to, at least in part, was something enabled them to repeatedly guess the passwords, which is not the same as brute forcing, exactly. But I only a creepy would know that they were misspeaking.
When I read this headline, I went to two different kind of barriers, right, for this. You know, like one is the rate limiting thing that we're talking about, right? Like, if in order to brute force it, you have to come to the Zoom central system to get the response that's like, this is valid or not. You can rate limit and or block after a certain number of attempts, right? Which makes sense. The other thing that we're all very much aware of, and a lot of this kind of stems from like basically LM hashes, right? Is if what we're brute forcing, we can break up, or in Jeff, a lot of your examples, right? Like crypto analysis, we can say like this portion of the hash I can easily calculate, therefore it reduces my number of guesses by X number of times. And I wasn't sure, again,
but it's two different rate limiting problems.
Exactly.
Too. So there's a rate limit. The rate limiting problem Jeff's talking about is that I can just always hit you with brute force.
If I know nothing and I know the key space, but like Jeff was saying, I can brute force.
It's not by definition brute forcing. It's trying unlimited login attempts.
But if in the session, if I'm in the session, I may get around the rate limiting because I'm in the session. So I can continue to brute force even though I'm in, and the rate limiting won't catch me.
Or I know basically like, it's not in plain text, but I know like the first X number of bytes of the password is calculated in this way, and therefore I can calculate that based on known data points.
Well, yeah,
right?
I mean,
like if I know the custom URL for the Zoom thing and some other factors, the first 8 bytes are within this more constrained region, and therefore I can basically reduce the number of guesses by
anything you can do to reduce the namespace.
A factor of X, I can reduce
so
the
if I know that the first letter in a password is A because they require it,
LM hashes, right? I know that I can break it up into two
you vastly
different parts.
Reduce the namespace, and you've reduced the amount of time it takes. But
if you can reduce the namespace and do brute forcing,
if I can hit you inside the session, your rate limiting at the edge may not see that because it looks like it's part of the session. So now I'm inside this Zoom meeting and I'm actually hitting you, and everybody's going, yeah, it's just a Zoom meeting. Don't worry about it.
So looking at the actual report, it was in the web client. They resolved the issue. The big one was some ways in which default passwords were generated by the Zoom auto-generated passwords, which were 6-digit numerics, which was what a million. A million. Yep, a million possible guesses. It was fairly simple to go through those possible millions because there was no rate limiting at Zoom's end, and there were a few other things there. But what Zoom did was they started doing some rate limiting, and they increased the length and the complexity of the password to include more characters and more than just numeric.
Well, Larry, I mean, when you think about this in a Wi-Fi context, right? Like we look at WEP and we look at WPA and we look at Bluetooth and we look at all, like a lot of it is basically any tactic we can use to reduce our key space, right? It enables that brute forcing attempt.
A primary example, you can, for WPA, WPA2 pre-shared key with WPS. WPS, you use a PIN to transfer a really complex password. You could put a 63-character password on your WPA2 pre-shared key network. If you have WPS enabled, all you're guessing is an 8-digit PIN.
And then you got it.
But that's 100 million guesses.
So let me summarize.
But Jeff, let me just finish this off real quick.
Sure.
100 million guesses for WPS. The problem is the WPS pin is interpreted not as an 8-digit pin. It is 2 4-digit parts.
Right.
It processed independently. So now you went from 100 million guesses to 20,000 guesses because you have to do the 4-digit parts. But the second half is only 3 digits because the last one's a checksum. So you're down to 11,000 possible guesses.
You're just reducing your key space
because of the way it's processed.
Right. Yep.
Well, and that's how early Microsoft passwords were configured, and that's how the Loft came along with Loftcrack. Brute forcing, by definition, is trying all combinations. There's, whether it's feasible to do in a reasonable amount of time or not is a different discussion. But brute forcing is trying all combinations. Saying that they've got some sort of flaw, and I'm hearing multiple vulnerabilities really from Larry actually reading the article, limiting the length to 6 and only numerics is just making brute forcing that much easier because it's going to happen that much quicker, which is a separate vulnerability than enabling multiple login attempts and not limiting how many times you can try to log in. Pop quiz. How many login attempts did PCI limit you to?
Shit.
I
don't know. 42.
6.
I was going to say
the answer
10.
is 6. And how long is the minimal amount of time that the system must be locked out?
I didn't know there was going to be a test.
After you've
6.
exhausted your attempts.
Tyler says
6 minutes.
1 hour.
30 minutes.
30.
1-5.
So I had both values halved.
30 minutes or administrative intervention.
Right.
That's not very many passwords. You better get it right.
I'm never going to pass this cert test. Damn it.
Right?
For the record, this whole Zoom thing came along because of Boris Johnson hosting the first cabinet meeting, the UK government cabinet meeting over Zoom. And he took a screenshot and he shared it, which included the Zoom ID for the meeting.
Yeah.
And this particular researcher, Tom, wanted to get into the meeting, and he had everything he needed except for the password, which was 6 digits.
But what I love about this, laws aside, and don't do this without permission, right? But as we think as hackers, we think about this problem differently than many other people, right? We think about the shortest path to how do I get in? We think about how do I reduce my key space, right? We don't think about like, oh, there's a password. I have to guess every single combination. We look for how do I reduce how many guesses I have to have?
The shortest path.
The shortest path to that. And that's really the hacker kind of ethos, which I just love.
It plays into the fact that it's not whether or not you're going to get in, it's what's the most efficient way to get in, because the getting in part is given. You're going to do it until you make it happen.
Absolutely.
I could get it in 20 years, right? But when we think as hackers, we're like, wait a minute, how could I do this faster to make it practical?
Yeah.
Right?
So if I just call some guy named Kyle down in the HR department and get him to give me the password, that's the shortest path.
But that's what I love about hacking. Is like there's no cheating in hacking, right? Like if hacking is I social engineer Kyle, that's totally on the table, right?
Yeah,
like,
hell yeah.
Like look at the Twitter hack we covered the past couple of weeks. Like it wasn't about like I'm gonna break into Twitter. It's like
just get somebody
how do
to click.
I social engineer the user that has access to everyone?
Find
right?
the easy. It's basic laziness. It's like what's the easiest way to do this? It's like I wanted to go drinking, but I still need to hack this system, so I'll just call Kyle and get him to give me the password.
But it comes down to like war games, right? Like we all watched war games back in the day, and we're like, how do I get the password? Like, like it's written down in the secretary's like pull-out slider drawer thing, and I just got to go read that the password this week is pencil, right? Like it's not. Yeah, it's just
you wait for Comrade Boris to tweet a picture of the Zoom link.
Exactly. I did have 3 articles I was hoping Joff would cover that do cover Python. Python developers prepare. was an article from Johannes from SANS, who's
Johannes
awesome.
Ulrich.
Yeah, Johannes Ulrich, just awesome person. Spent a lot of time with Johannes, had dinner with Johannes. Just would love to, can't wait to hang out in person with Johannes again. Right? Was talking about Johannes is very much a Perl programmer, and you can't, but you can't blame people that grew up on a language like that. Totally get it. It's like, I'm on this Python thing and I notice these things. What Johannes is pointing out in this article, I think really underscores the need for an ORM, something to abstract that database layer away from developers, right? And this is kind of a theme that I'm on, being a security person and a developer in the same role today. As a developer, I don't want to have to, and a security person, like, let's put this in perspective, right? I don't want to have to worry about security problems, right? Like, where and how I store my secrets, how I interact with the database, and is it secure or not, are not questions I want to be asking. I want to write code that performs awesome and just runs so fast. I want functional code without bugs, right? I don't want to have to worry about, I got to do those first two things and also worry about, like, is my code secure? I want to abstract as much of that as possible away from the developer, right?
Right.
And in Johannes's example with interacting with the database, I think an ORM or some kind of database abstraction layer that's doing much of that sanitization allows me as a developer to say, I want code that runs really fast and I want code that doesn't crash, right?
Yep.
Like, basically, those are my goals.
Most coders want,
right? And have that functionality there without worrying about that security aspect of it. So that was my comment there. 11 tips and tricks to write better Python code. I thought was a really good article and one that you should look at. And there was one more in there. New features in Python 3.9.
Definitely worth checking out.
And I'm like, when is Python 3.10? Are we going to have to all convert? No, it's going to be 3.9.1, 3.9.2. Like,
and here I am still fighting with Python 2.7.
Larry, I am there with you, and I'm ready to pull the plug and be like, I'm just going to convert to Python 3 because I've read so many articles like this about the new features in 3. I'm like, yeah, like, let's just do it. Pull the plug.
Yeah.
So here I was. We're turning a course update for 6.17, and then one of the last steps is to run this Python script against the USB to generate MD5 hashes and stuff. And it's on my new Mac, and I only have Python 3 installed, and it's a Python 2.7.
Oh.
And Josh Wright wrote it. So I reach out to Josh, and I'm like, hey, man, I'm going to open an issue for Python 3 support, but I'm going to do a port. I'm going to see if I can do it because it's a super simple script. But it was 11:30 at night, and I had had a couple of adult beverages, and I started, and I'm like, I'm going to put this away. And I got up the next morning, and I'm going to look at it, and he sends me a message on Slack and says, oh, hey, if you want to check out this branch in GitHub called Python 3, it's already done. I'm like, you motherfucker.
Well, there's some cheats in there too, Larry. A lot of like linting tools will tell you, like, hey, your project is Python 2.7, and guess what? I'm going to tell you all the things that you should be doing in Python 3 so, like, you can gradually do that conversion. Now, just about every one of them was a print statement. Yes, and print statements are
a big problem. Yeah, I mean,
huge
that's
where when you're looking at larger applications, you don't use print. You use a logger object, which abstracts away the print statement. So then that comes down to basically all the things left in Python 3. Joff did a webcast with BHAS on converting from 2 to 3 in Python, right? So it comes down to all those other things. And if you can put that in your linter, right, you can kind of be like fix it as you go and then work towards 80% of that point and then be like, all right, look, let me just throw the Python 3 interpreter in there and see where I'm going. It looks like 3.9 is still in beta, so I think 3.7 or 3.8 is kind of where you want to be. Yeah. Once you're there, I think the transition is much easier. My concern is what happens when Python 4 comes out and we all have to do this transition again. How long is that in the future?
The deprecation dance.
Yep.
Well, that's okay. They got a new parser coming out in 3.10 that they're talking about in this. Wonderful.
Right? Yes, you go from 3.9. But a lot of the changes that I've noticed, and I don't know if it's so much functional as it is security related, are very much focused around the typecasting, right? Because Python is dynamically typecast, so you don't have to specify a type.
Nope.
But
Right.
as I've said before, once you get to about 10,000 lines or more in your Python application, like type becomes a thing that can really bite you in the ass. And conversion to Python 3 in any iteration is going to help you in your type conversion, so much so that like when you define a function, you can define what types are accepted by that function, and a lot more extended functionality in the type definition and checking inside of those functions. Yeah,
it's going to slowly evolve towards C.
No, but you say, and I know why you're laughing, right, Doug? But like, it's a double-edged sword, right? Like, being type unspecific has
it has huge advantages, but it's sloppy.
As your project gets larger,
but
it becomes
sloppy as hell.
Oh, I know. I totally.
It's just a giant sloppy mess. You just throw everything in a pit and hope it survives.
Because I have Python projects that are very short, concise.
Would that be
finite
a sweaty
projects.
Python pit?
Yeah,
The Python
Rewrite that
pit,
shit. See, that'll fix you on that loose typing stuff.
right. Larger projects, loose typing is a pain in the ass. Shorter projects, it's great.
It's that's why scripting languages and compile languages always existed, because scripting languages are supposed to be for smaller projects, but now they've expanded it. Oh, wow, here's Python. Let's use it for everything. And it becomes a problem because of typing and memory use and all these kind of things that don't matter when you're writing 100 lines of code. When you're writing 100,000 lines of code, all of a sudden, wow, it actually does matter.
But what's interesting with Python is they've recognized that, and they've slowly started building in.
Slowly
in features.
becoming C.
But really, like walking the line, like not becoming C, but giving you the capability to do that. To have the smaller projects and the larger projects.
It's turning into two things. So it's one thing is now just the traditional. It's a great way to solve simple problems, but they're starting to say, wow, so many people are using this, we might need to have something more comprehensive.
Like so many people have Python projects that are over 10,000 lines of code.
Hell yes, and it's like, wow.
Nobody we know.
Right?
No way, man.
Our project is probably has hovered around 10,000 lines of code for the past 3 years.
And that's getting ugly if you're non-type specific. It's like a giant mess. It's a ball pit.
It could be worse. It could be 10,000 lines of PHP.
Oh my God!
I agree, Larry.
Don't even say stuff like that.
That would be like way worse.
That's like going to the ball pit at Chuck E. Cheese in the COVID pandemic
and licking all the balls.
Yes, agreed, Larry.
Don't take that out of context.
Yeah, no way.
Exactly what it's like.
Oh yeah. All right. I think on that note,
I had all those. Yeah. Anyway. Larry, take us out.
Over and lick all the balls.